Hi, it's Llarold, and I'm going to talk about how to tank Uldaman Legacy of Tyr. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, before we jump in, I'll do the same disclaimer I always do. This is the route and approach I take when playing with pugs to make things easier for uncoordinated groups where I don't really know the skill level of everybody that I'm playing with, don't know them at all, and I expect them generally to make some mistakes. So I want to keep things as easy as I possibly can for everybody in the group. Not necessarily the most efficient route. You know, we're not doing any invis skips. Basically, W key route. That's the goal here. All right, let's just go ahead and get right into it. As for Bloodlust Timings, I like to lust the first pull. Now, on some tyrannical weeks, you know, like especially with groups that aren't that confident in their ability to actually finish the dungeon at all, I know some people do like to hold for the first boss, and usually in that case, they'll do the second boss, Bromach, who is a more difficult boss than the Lost Dwarves. They'll like to do that boss first and actually lust it. It's pretty far into the dungeon, though. It's like 5 or 6 pulls of trash, 4 to 5 pulls of trash into the dungeon, so that's a pretty long time to hold lust, especially if you are going to do the normal intended route where you kill the Lost Vikings first and then do Bromach second. That is like 8 minutes, 10 minutes into the dungeon, so I mean, you definitely should just lust the first pull in the majority of situations. Then after that, you know, you pretty much just want to send it on every boss that it's available after that. So usually I'll lust the first pull, and then generally it won't be up by the time I get to Bromach, but it will be for Sentinel Talondras, the third boss. And then ideally it'll be up for the final boss, Chrono-Lord Deios, and he really sucks. So it is definitely a good thing to have it for him. And that generally leaves you one time to lust in between the start of the dungeon and the end of the dungeon. If you're able to fit in more, you know, maybe that means you're going a little slow, fine, go ahead, but otherwise 3 lusts is generally pretty good. All right, now let's take a look at that MDT route here, and I'll just go ahead and emphasize the first pull here. I do like to do kind of a triple pull. There's these little scavenging leapers. They're just like little bitty guys. They don't really do a lot, and I like to drag the first set of guys up into the hallway. There's this patrol over on the right. I like to grab them as well. The Berserker will do a big slam to everything around him, so that is like a little a circle on the ground that you need to move out of, but other than that, it's just like a bunch of little itty-bitty AoE goofballs. One dude who will cast Chain Lightning that you really want to interrupt, the Geomancer. And then this vicious Basilisk who will do like Spiked Carapace that makes him reflect damage. That's also good to interrupt, but pretty much you just cleave all this stuff down, and then I like to chain into the next pull, and there will be 2 Geomancers, 2 casters over here. I do like to drag them over into the 3 vicious Basilisks, so every single one of these guys will have an important interrupt to get, but the Chain Lightning is definitely more important to interrupt than the Spiked Carapace. Do all of these guys and then move into the next area. Again, 2 Geomancers, a Berserker, and 2 Basilisks. And then in a normal route, I just go into the Vikings straight from there. In some groups where, like I said, I've lusted on Bromach first, to people who aren't super confident in their ability to actually clear the dungeon and really want to make sure they have lust and cooldowns up for that boss, because he generally is the hardest boss in the dungeon. You will instead like clear straight to him, so you just continue through the next couple of pulls. Either way, whether you're doing Lost Vikings first or Bromach first, you're going to just continue these next couple of pulls. There's this one over here that is a pretty large pull, and then I do kind of like to do this next pull as a double pull, because none of this stuff's really very dangerous in here. The rock throwers throw rocks, pretty self-explanatory. And then the 2 Berserkers, even though they have a lot of health and they can do a lot of damage to the tank with their auto attacks, as long as everybody steps out of the circle slams that they do, they're actually not very dangerous. And so the bigger danger in this whole pull is really just the Geomancer getting Chain Lightning cast off. So as long as you interrupt all of those, this is really not all that dangerous of a pull. You just want to kind of AoE it down, CC it down. I would say the most difficult part is actually getting these doofuses to come up the stairs and join into the rest of the pull. And if you're on a Paladin or a Demon Hunter and you can silence the Geomancer in a melee range, that really helps. Otherwise, you just line of sight to make sure that it comes in, and that works pretty well too. Then you deal with Bromach, definitely the worst fight in this place. And then the next 2 pulls are very simple. They're kind of spread out from each other. You can either do these 2 Earthen Custodians and a Rafty Custodian. I think that really, Refty Custodian, I really think this is best to do as a single pull. The Earthen Custodians are very basic. They just do a cleave. You just face them away. The Refty Custodians are more complex. There's more to them. They have a stacking damage buff that they get called, Ancient Power. It gives them a pretty significant increase to damage and haste, and if you stun them, that will cause them to take a lot more damage. They're very vulnerable to stuns. They take 50% more damage. They also reset all of those stacks. And then they have this Jagged Bite that they will cast on the tank. You can't outrange it. It doesn't have very long range on it. It's, I hate this kind of mechanic. I find it to be deeply cringe to have to constantly outrange an enemy attack, and they will just chain attempt to cast it. So I really try to stun them when they're going to cast, like when they're in the middle of casting the Jagged Bite. But, you know, if you have to outrange it to not get bled to death by it, I guess do that. It hits very hard. Again, I hate this, but, you know, you got to deal with it. And then the next pull, you can just pull this one Refty Custodian that's up at the top of the stairs into this pull here. That makes it a pretty dangerous pull with 2 Refty Custodians and 2 Earthen Custodians. It's really hitting the tank a lot. But then down the stairs, you only have to kill 1 mob, 1 Refty Custodian to get into the next room. So I kind of like to do that as a double pull, kind of in the middle here, and then just slowly drag them down as I'm heading to the next boss. And that's really all that there is in this area. I mean, it's 2 pulls between bosses 2 and 3. And then here you have a very, very, very long stretch of pulls relative to like the 5 mobs that you killed in the last area, where you have this double pull that you do here with these 2 Earthen Custodians and an Earthen Weaver, and then 2 more Earthen Custodians and 2 Earthen Weavers. And the Weavers are definitely the most dangerous part of this whole area, and there are a lot of them. They cast Stone Bolt, which you can interrupt. It's not really a very dangerous spell. And they also cast Hail of Stone, which deals a massive amount of damage to the group in AoE, but it's not an interruptible cast. You have to stun them or paralyze them or do some sort of actual crowd control. You can knock them, grip them, anything like that will work, but you do have to do something to CC them to cancel that Hail of Stone, or it's going to be a lot of stress on the healer. You also want to face the Custodians away. That's crucial for this whole area as well, because they will cleave. The next pull is very simple. It's 2 Earthen Warders, so they will cast Trapped in Stone or Curse of Stone on people you want to interrupt that. That's pretty important to interrupt. And then it is another Earthen Custodian, so you just kind of pull them back, interrupt that. I usually like to pull this next pull into this one as well. It kind of depends on how I'm feeling, but generally speaking, I would say the right side is much easier to deal with than this left side. I think the left side is a lot more dangerous, and, you know, smaller mobs as well, so easier to kind of cleave down quickly, won't waste as much time as dealing with this big stone golem over here. And the main thing you want to focus on is just making sure you're crowd controlling the Hail of Stone cast from the Weavers, and then interrupting the Curse of Stone cast from the Warders and facing the Custodians into the wall. And the same thing will hold true with the next pull. It's basically the exact same lessons as you've learned in the previous several pulls, except this big bad boy here, this Runic Protector, will also cast Earthquake and Difficult Terrain. Earthquake will do damage to everybody in the group. It just is kind of what it is, but Difficult Terrain will be like spawned underneath people, and it will do a lot of damage, really quickly, and it also slows. So as soon as those spawn, you want to move away from them. You want to make sure that they're not just like sitting under you, doing damage to you. This can definitely kill people. I've seen this kill a lot of people over the seasons of doing this dungeon, and you just kind of want to be prepared for at least one person to die. If the group is a little uncoordinated, it can be kind of dangerous. If you're on a tank that can heal, Druid, Paladin, this is definitely a good pull to really like blow all the healing tools you have to keep people alive, because it can be pretty stressful on the healer having to deal with a lot of damage coming out, but also having to move at the same time. Just always kind of stressful. And then the next pull before the fourth boss here, I like to just do all of the beasts in this area at the same time. There are a couple of spiders at the front and back. They don't really do a ton. And then there are 3 bats, and those are all together, and they all need to be interrupted. They cast Sonic Burst. It is an AoE silence. It will silence the whole group. So if you're on a Paladin or a Demon Hunter, it'll silence you as well. So you really want to get all those interrupts, and you can get them with Shockwave. Any sort of AoE CC will work just fine. But you want to cleave those guys down. They're really not very dangerous other than that. And then you move on to the 4th boss, deal with him, and then you have your final stretch of a lot of trash along the way to the final boss. So I like to do this first pull just on its own in the hallway here, outside of the 4th boss's room. It's 2 Weavers and a Golem, and I just kind of treat it the same way. Different kind of Golem, though. This one just does like a big AoE slap to all the players in the group, but not really any other mechanics there. And you just want to, again, continue to crowd control when they cast Hail of Stone. Then I skip this one guy over here on the right side. I just hug along the left. Really pretty easy to deal with. You just hug along the left. There will be 2 Weavers, another big Golem that does the slap, and then a Custodian. So again, face away, heal through the damage, CC the Weavers. And then you will finally run into your first kind of interesting pull, and that is a 3-mob patrol with an Earthen Guardian who will do this big circle cast that gives everybody in the circle a big damage increase, and I think also maybe damage reduction. In any case, it's a big circle that you want to pull everybody out of. And then there will also be a couple of Custodians that are just hanging out here that aren't part of the patrol, one that is part of the patrol, and then a Warder that you'll want to interrupt the Curse of Stone on. And so when this guy drops this big circle, you want to pull everything out of it back into the room that you were in before. And then once he drops the big circle, once it ends, you'll pull all that stuff back together, cleave all of this down, and then move up to the next pull. The 3 mobs at the bottom of the staircase, I like to pick them up, interrupt the Warder, and then drag them up onto the 2 Ebonstone Golems at the top of the staircase. Now, in the past, the way that you could deal with these guys, their Thunderous Clap, which used to deal a very, very dangerous amount of damage, and I mean, eventually it will, depending on key level. So in the past, you could take them right where they are, just like right there, and then people could kind of line of sight right at the bottom of the stairs. They would just, as the clap is casting, they would just step over to the side and line of sight it. I believe it is not line of sightable anymore. I believe that is correct. I know it's not line of sightable for me. I'm a tank. I'm never able to get out of line of sight, and that's okay. Maybe people can try it, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't work anymore. In any case, you just want to kind of burn through this pull and then proceed into the next room. You can do this as a double pull. I like to do it as a double pull. It basically is just a combination of kind of this pull here, or really this pull here, and I guess this patrol here, because you get a Guardian who will drop that big damage circle, the big Blessing of Tears circle, which is very annoying, and then also the Ebonstone Golem doing his big slam, and then just a ton of Warders. So you really want to bring your interrupts out. If you're on a Paladin or a Demon Hunter, I think you're safe to do this as a double pull. You can just cover the interrupts yourself. If you are not, and you're not really that confident in your group's interrupts, I would split this up into 2. Otherwise, try to do this as a double, and then just as soon as that circle goes down, you're immediately pulling everything out. You're burning everything down. You're definitely popping cooldowns as well for this double pull, because it is pretty dangerous. But once it's dead, you move on to the next pull, and the next pull is really quite a step down in terms of difficulty. You'll deal with 2 infinite agents. They just sort of stab you, the tank, and they give themselves some buffs, but they really aren't all that dangerous on their own. And then there's the big Infinite Time Reaver. Very cool model on this guy. I like it. Just like a classic Draconid, but with the nice infinite color swap palette. I think it looks pretty tight, I have to say. And then this very annoying Stolen Time debuff, where they will steal your haste and give it to themselves, and do damage to you as well, like stacking damage over time effect. So these guys are pretty annoying. You do kind of want to focus them down. Not really any mechanics that you can kind of deal with, though. So I like to just pull this one guy over here that's at the top of the stairs into this 2-mob pull, just cleave it all down, and then once that's done, head down the stairs. And I actually like to pull all these little whelps in with these 2 guys, just 2 of the same mob types. Not really any sort of special mechanics, not really any kind of fancy movements or facing or anything that you really have to do in this area. The Time Blade comes out very fast, less than 1 second, and it is just a single target slash. And it's just a regular hit and then a slow. So really not anything mechanically interesting there. The only real interesting thing here in this final room is you can come over to the right side, jump up kind of onto a ledge, and then jump over to another ledge, sort of like you're jumping onto like a chair or a pillar area there, and then jumping up onto a ledge, and then that'll allow you to walk around these 2 Time Reavers, because this is a pretty dangerous pull. Double Time Reaver is pretty nasty, much more so than doing like 1 Time Reaver and an agent, having everybody getting massively stacked up with that damage over time effect and that minus haste. It just really sucks. It really puts the healer under too much strain. And so being able to skip this pull is really useful. And then you proceed into the final boss's room and you deal with the terrible final boss, and then that's it. That's the whole dungeon. You've done it, and you're good to go. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the bosses in this dungeon, and we'll start with the Lost Dwarves. They are the first boss in the dungeon in a normal approach, and there are 3 of them. You do kind of want to pick all 3 of them up, at least to get threat on all of them, get them all stacked up with each other. Balog does a frontal cleave, and this is sort of the main tank mechanic of the fight. You just want to face him away from the group. That's kind of all there is to it. This is very, very simple as far as fights go. You pick him up, you face him away from everybody else. It's that simple. He will spin and point an arrow at people, and that is something where he'll like lock facing and you just want to step out of that. It's possible, depending on where people are standing, that it might face at you, so you want to be prepared for that. Eric the Swift will cast a Skullcracker. That'll be like a circle on the ground. You just want to step away from that. And then the only other real mechanic in the fight is the defensive bulwark from Olaf, and that is just he'll charge to an area, he will start channeling a massive damage reduction for the whole group, and you just want to interrupt that, and then he's done. And then at certain points throughout the fight, they will all jump into their longboat, and that'll fly around, and they'll throw fireballs down on the ground. That was changed in Season 4 to have a much smaller radius, but actually deal a significant amount of damage. I'd never stood in them before. Apparently early on in Dragonflight, when this dungeon was previously in the Mythic Plus rotation, the bombs that they would throw out had a huge radius, but did like absolutely no damage. They didn't scale with key level. I never knew that. I never got hit by them to find that out, but apparently now they do scale up pretty significantly and deal a lot of damage. Again, not something I'm interested in finding out about because I don't plan on getting hit by these stupid things. So just dodge the bombs, and that's kind of all there is to it. Simple fight. All right, Bromach is the second fight, and he is also a simple fight, but simple doesn't mean easy, and I think that's crucial here. I would say Lost Dwarves, simple and easy. Bromach, simple and hard. So the main mechanic of this fight as the tank really is the Call of the Deep. He will summon guys around the sides of the room. It'll be 4 of them at a time. It'll be 3 ambushers, so 3 melee guys, and then 1 geomancer, 1 spellcaster guy. If you're on a DK or a demon hunter, I guess, but really a paladin and a DK, then you're all right. You can focus that geomancer and then interrupt it or grip it into melee range, deal with it, no problem. If you're on a monk, druid, warrior, you know, one of the classes that isn't like privileged by Blizzard at being able to just lock down casters and range mobs, then you really have a lot more trouble on your hands here. You're reliant on a ranged person in the group to interrupt that geomancer in, or you have to go out there and get it yourself while also getting the melee guys that are spawning on the other side of the room. It's definitely a bit of a hectic ad cleave fight, truly, and you are having to run around and pick up all these ads a lot throughout the fight. This is exacerbated by the boss spawning quaking totems, which will basically require you to grab all of those mobs and pull them onto the totem. The boss will cast Bloodlust, which will give him and all of the rest of the monsters in the fight a massive increase to their haste for a really long time, like 20 seconds or so. And so the way that you cancel that out is by pulling them all onto the totem and killing the totem. That will stun the boss. That will cancel everything. It will stun all of them and make them take 200% increased damage for 10 seconds. So it's really, really powerful, this impact that killing the totem has, but you do actually have to kill the totem. And that is why I say this is a simple boss, but a hard one. It's simple, mechanically not very complex, but it is reliant on being able to do a lot of burst damage into that totem and kill that totem and beat those Bloodlust casts ideally. And yeah, that can actually just be a lot for uncoordinated groups to deal with. And then the only other mechanic in the fight is Thundering Slam. The boss will do a very long cast and then do a big slam on the ground. And the way you deal with that is really simple. You run out of the slam. Not very complicated, again, but you know, it does exacerbate the trying to focus down the totem. Usually he'll do that out of the totem. If you're killing the totem in a decent span of time, you will be able to kill the totem. He will then cast the Thundering Slam afterwards. So at that point, you just dodge away while you're going to pick up the ads anyway, and it's not really a problem. Sentinel Talondras is the third boss, and he is built very much like the Refty guys, the Refty Guardians that you dealt with outside of his arena. There's only like 3 of them in the dungeon that you have to fight, but that is basically how he functions. He is vulnerable to stuns, very vulnerable to stuns, and then he also spawns stuns throughout the fight. And this actually works perfectly. So in an ideal situation, your group wouldn't try to help stun at all. They would just let you do the driving, let you take control of everything. In the footage that I have of this, I am playing with a group of people who are helping. And, you know, ultimately, you just kind of have to learn to accept it. I think one of the most important skills for a tank to develop really is the ability to improvise based on what everybody else in the group is doing, and that is definitely something that I tried to put on display in this footage. Is, you know, normally if I had my preferences, nobody would help. I would take care of it all, but that isn't what happened, and I'm just going to kind of roll with the stuns that they're putting out there. Okay, so the main mechanics of this fight are that she will fill up her energy to full, and then when she hits full, she will cast Titanic Empowerment, which will cause her to basically wipe the group. You're able to cancel that Titanic Empowerment cast by stunning her, and you do want to stun her during the Titanic Empowerment cast, because every time you stun her, she will then gain a stacking damage bonus. Now, you're able to stun her by using the Resonating Orbs. She will put a debuff on players in the group and also spawn one random orb. So she'll put a debuff on 2 players, they'll each drop an orb on the ground, and then she'll drop a third one on the ground as well, separate from any player locations. She also gives herself 2 stacks of the buff Inexorable, which will make her immune to 2 stun effects. So what you want to do is, once she has dropped those orbs on the ground, you want to walk her through 2 of those orbs so that she is now no longer immune to stuns. And then once she starts to cast Titanic Empowerment, you walk her through the 3rd stun circle, and then she's stunned. The end. That is all you really do on this fight. Really not all that complicated. She has one other mechanic, Crushing Stomp. It deals physical damage and it does knock you back. It's actually dodgeable. I think it's maybe parryable as well. There have been a lot of times where I was not knocked back by it and I wasn't playing a Blood DK with Death's Advance going or anything, and I know it is dodgeable on Monk. Pretty cool to be able to do that. Again, I do think it is deflectable with parry, but I'm not 100% on that. But in any case, that would explain why sometimes you might be expecting to get knocked back by the Crushing Stomp and you aren't. And then that's kind of all that you really have to deal with in this fight. It really is just about managing the stuns on the boss. So if people do try to help by stunning the boss, they can wind up stunning her early, and that won't really cause any problems with the Titanic Empowerment. It'll still reset her energy back to 0 when she's stunned, but it will then give her that stacking damage buff that she gets. I believe it's 5% every time she's stunned, and that can be kind of annoying. It also means that there will be stun circles left on the ground that are extra that you'll have to deal with, and that's not great. Now, the worst case scenario is that somebody screws up and runs into one of those stun circles, and that is actually really bad. You definitely don't want that to happen at all, but if you do, you can just use a regular stun, Hand of Justice, leg sweep, whatever, to stun her, and that will get the job done as well. Other than that, that's really all there is to the fight. Not really all that much going on in this fight other than managing the stuns and moving the boss into the circles. All right, the 4th boss is Emberon, and this is, I think, a much less complicated boss than the fight that we just dealt with, Sentinel Talondras. Basically, the main mechanic of this fight is really just like dodging balls that are being thrown around. The way I like to do this is I normally like to just pull the boss toward the door. Either of the doors, actually, the entry or the exit door. That kind of gives you the widest berth from the robots that he has around the sides of the room that are kind of firing fireballs out in random directions. He will cast Searing Clap, which will deal a frontal cone of damage. It will blast you, the tank, and it will apply a damage over time effect. It is dispellable, so your healer can remove that, or you can dwarf racial it off. He also does just like waves the damage to the group, and you will have to all spread out for that to explode. That's kind of the only real mechanics of the main part of the fight, the sort of normal phase 1 of the fight. Then there is a phase 2 where he will jump to the middle of the room, activate all the robots around the sides of the room, and then sort of set up 2 big flaming beams that will sweep around the room very slowly in a circle pattern. And so you just don't want to get hit by the beams. You just walk around the room very slowly. I think you can anti-magic shell and walk through the beam. I think it actually applies a debuff, but you know, one of those things where I don't really care to play around with it. It's not really all that interesting mechanically. I just kind of like to walk around the room, kill the robots, and then pick the boss back up and pull him toward the door. I think in the footage, I kind of forgot the positioning on this fight because it'd been a while, and I pulled him over to the side and then realized about halfway through phase 1 that I was definitely in the wrong spot and making it a lot harder for everybody, but didn't want to go running the boss all over the place since he has the Searing Clap frontal cone. I just leave him there for the time being and then reposition, once we got out of the intermission phase. And then that's kind of all there is to this fight. I think that this fight is relatively easy for people to deal with as long as they can handle the damage requirements. But, not really all that interesting for the tank. It's a frontal cone fight. That's kind of all there is to it. Chrono-Lord Deios is the final boss of this dungeon, and I think it is actually a pretty interesting fight. I think it is a fight that can be really dangerous, really difficult on groups that aren't coordinated or just frankly do the fight wrong. And one of those fights that can be really, really easy if the group is well coordinated and handles the mechanics correctly. So the main mechanic of the fight for the tank is Sand Breath. The boss will, just like Emberon, he will blast you with a frontal cone. Unlike Emberon, it doesn't have any sort of dispel mechanic. It just does a bunch of magic damage. So use all your normal magic damage reduction stuff, anti-magic shell, anti-magic zone if you want to, spell ward, spell block, all that kind of thing. And then he also has Wing Buffet, which will knock everybody back. You just want to transcend back into melee range, Death's Advance to prevent that knockback, charge, leap, horse, all the usual stuff for that. And then the more important mechanic of the fight is the Eternity Zones that the boss will spawn around the room. He will basically shoot out pools of sand near where players are standing. So the way that I like to deal with the fight because of this is I like to start out the fight by pulling the boss into what is basically the bottom left corner of the room. If you're standing facing the boss and you're thinking of it like a clock face and behind the boss is 12 o'clock, I like to pull him to like 7:30. And I like to just walk him around the room in a great big slow circle. And the idea here is the goal, and I will even ping this, I'll even say to people, the goal is for them to try to always be between the boss and the wall. Always be between the boss and the wall. You can fan out somewhat between the boss and the wall, that's fine, but you want to be between the boss and the wall, and you want to give people a little bit of room between the boss and the wall to actually spread out and drop those eternity zones, those sand pools. But the idea here is that the sand pools will spawn where people are. And so if people are standing in the middle of the room, they're going to fill the room up with sand very quickly, way quicker than you will be able to drag the boss around the room in a big giant circle. And that's a real problem. I mean, that will ultimately wind up with you running out of space to deal with. The sand pools do eventually despawn. You're also able to eat those up during the boss's intermission phase, and that's great, but you are not able to eat them up at nearly the rate at which he spawns them. So you really want to be very judicious with the space throughout the room and try and drop all those pools more toward the outsides of the room, and then steadily just walk the boss around the room in a big circle, basically. So as I said, the boss does have a big intermission phase. It's called Rewind Time. And what you're going to want to do during that Rewind Time phase is, instead of the normal behavior where you step out of the Eternity Zones, the sand pools, you want to jump into them. So normally speaking, they do a bunch of damage and they reduce your haste by 30%, so a full negative Bloodlust. But during the Reverse Time, they actually give you a bunch of haste. They give you 50% increased haste, actually, so more than a full Bloodlust. And they don't do any damage to you, so you want to jump into those pools, and as you're standing in them, the boss will suck them back up and actually lift them up off the ground. So as soon as he starts to Reverse Time, I like to drag him kind of right back into the middle of the sand pools that he has most recently spawned, suck up as many as I possibly can, and then importantly, once he finishes that Reverse Time, he will almost immediately start out with a Sand Breath. So I like to just basically pop a cooldown right at the end of it, eat the Sand Breath, make sure I'm facing away from everybody, and then drag the boss a little bit away from where we were just sucking up all the sand pools, and continue that same pattern of moving the boss around the room in a clockwise sort of circle, although it's a square room, and give people a little bit of room to be between the boss and the wall. Ultimately you want to try to coach people to be between the boss and the wall so that you are saving more space for later. And you just basically rinse, repeat that set of behavior over and over again, making sure you're pointing the Sand Breath away from everybody and moving the boss so that there is room to stand safely until the next Reverse Time, at which point you want to suck up as much sand as you can and then repeat. All right, so that is how you tank Uldaman Legacy of Tyr. It's a pretty long dungeon, not a personal favorite. I don't think it's one that's going to be remembered all that fondly, but it is in the dungeon list for this season, so you still got to do it. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Feel free to ask questions if you have any, and good luck. Thanks for watching. Bye.